Voy a ser grande, grande, tan grande como mis sueños. Nada me va a impedir que pueda tocar el cielo. Voy a ser grande, grande, tan grande como mi fe. Aunque me alcance el cansancio, yo sé que lo lograré. Aunque me alcance el cansancio, yo sé que lo lograré. El Jeffrey. I will be great and greater, as great as my dreams. Nothing will impede me from going high as the sky. I will be great and greater, even if I can't get by. Even if I get a little tired, I will push all the way. Even if I get tired, I will push all the way. El Jeffrey. That was my alarm clock from middle school to high school every morning at 7:05. Unless I hit the snooze button at 7:10 and then again at 7:15. And if that wasn't waking me up, I was waking up to the screams of my grandmother, Yasua, bebe, mira muchacho, levántate, get up boy. I put grandma, school's not till 8:45. And then she'll respond, E que a la madruga, Dios lo ayuda. He who rises early, God will help him. But help me do what? You see, I listen to that song every morning, just like the campesinos and the jibaros, my ancestors, used to wake up every morning singing. A campesino is a peasant farmer. A jibaro too. Campesino is the Dominican term, and jibaro is the Puerto Rican term. And peasant farmers typically didn't amount to much but just that, a farmer. So when my grandmother told me, get up early so that God could help you, it was help me do what? So I could be just like you, a campesina? Or so I could just get up and be the typical story, the typical narrative that was sold to me in the public school system and in my neighborhood. I grew up in Jersey City, in the public school system. And honestly, being an urban Latino male in this community, there was but so much hope for us. You know, that we were constantly reminded that urban youth, Latino and black men, only amounted to very few things in life. You could be a dealer, incarcerated, a young father. You barely made it out of high school. And that was just the narrative that was constantly reminded to us. We had great programs growing up in the Jersey City public school system. We had DARE, we had GREAT, and they told us the things that were right and the things that were wrong and what we shouldn't go after, gangs and whatnot. Yet we were always reminded, hey, look to your left, look to your right, and remember that one of you, unfortunately, won't make it to graduation. And that was the narrative. That was the story that we were constantly told. That one of us in this room wasn't going to make it. So then it started to click as I started growing up and actually growing a little bit of passion for school, that I'm going to be great one day, like my grandmothers want me to be. I was raised by both my grandmothers, my grandmother Lydia and my grandmother Esperanza. My grandmother Lydia only got up to 4th grade of school. My grandfather Miguel only got up to middle school. My grandfather Claudio, who I'm lucky to be named after, only made it to elementary school. And my grandmother Esperanza was one of the first in her family to graduate high school. But that was it. There wasn't much for them. Because in the era that they were raised, women were just told one thing. Las mujeres se quedan en la casa. Women were only told to be home. And men were the providers. So at a very young age, I was taught that I had to be a provider. I had to provide for my family. I had to be strong. I had to be the alpha male. Yet, for the men in my family, school wasn't being that alpha male. It was working hard. But for my grandmothers who barely made it out of school, it was, you have to go to school. You have to be better. Because I had to break that stereotype. I had to break that stigma that I was just going to be the typical kid from the block, chilling on the stoop, and doing but so much. Because the typical story ends like this. You either become a young father and drop out of high school, you work in a barbershop, you own your own bodega, but you never live up to that doctor dream that your grandmother wanted for you, or that cop that your grandfather wanted you to be, or that military man that your dad wanted you to be. So I started to think about, what is it that I truly want? And how am I going to break this stereotype? How am I going to break the stigma? Because honestly, I really didn't want to be in school at the time. I didn't think about being a leader. I didn't think about being involved. Because from the neighborhood I came from, that wasn't what was told to us. We weren't going to make it that far. So why even prep for something like that? Well, in 2008, I broke the first stereotype. I graduated middle school. And to my family, that was a big accomplishment, but not the greatest. But if I went back home to Puerto Rico and Dominican Republic, that was one of the greatest accomplishments. Because if you make it out of middle school, you got your future set for you. Right after middle school, you begin working over there. And studies have shown that, unfortunately, even though there's a bunch of educational reforms going on right now in Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico, to create better education systems, they expanded the time from 8 in the morning to 12 o'clock in the afternoon to an 8 and 3 o'clock afternoon school period. And with a lunch in between and some recess time, right? They went from just small little cabins for education to now they're building these huge facilities. But yet they're still following the same outdated curriculum. They're still following the same teachers that barely know English and French, yet they're parlez-vous français as much as they can, but they know but so much. They're still doing the same things and, again, selling the same narrative that was sold to me here. Once you guys are done with middle school, if you barely make it out of high school, you get to work on this farm. And you get to continue your family's legacy of the colmado, of the bodega. And that's it. There wasn't much hope, and there still isn't much hope when I go home. So I started thinking about that, and I started trying to apply that, like those stories, to make myself a little bit better. I was like, my grandparents went through this struggle to get to America, and from countries that barely valued education. So how can I be and break the stereotype? How can I create my own type? How can I create my own story? How can I create my own narrative? What's the atypical Dominican narrative rather than the typical Dominican Puerto Rican boy from Jersey City narrative? So I started to apply myself a little bit more in school. And yes, it was a roller coaster ride. I graduated straight A student in middle school and went back down to C's, D's, and F's, because as a freshman, all I was concerned with was going to senior lunch and not class. But eventually there was a man, a counselor of mine, who was like, boy, you got to do better, because if not, you're going to just be typical. And that word just bothered me, being typical. It was bad enough I was already labeled a typical Dominican because salsa, bachata, merengue ran through my veins, and everywhere I go, I had a, hey. And everywhere I go, I had to hit everybody with a que lo que, mani. And it was bad enough, that was typical for me. But to be called a typical student, never. I never could be a typical student, because a typical student in my household was B's and C's. And if my grandmother ever saw a B on my report card, it was over. I might as well have brought home F's to her. So I started applying myself a bit more. He's like, why don't you get involved in the college prep program? So I'm like, I don't know, man. College? I think I'm going to just join the military like my pops. I don't know. He's like, the military for what? You have so much potential. I'm like, I don't know, because when I was in middle school and I said that I want to go to Princeton, do this, somebody shunned me out and they say, go to NJCU. I'm like, nah, never that. Harvard on the Boulevard, I would never. Yeah, in 2012, in July, I came right here to NJCU. But I started building that rapport with the college prep program. And I started getting myself a little bit more involved because I saw that Jersey City, they had the Dare the Great program to kind of help us out. But now we have this college prep program for high schoolers that was kind of pushing that agenda that it's okay to be smart. Because the society we grew up in told us, yo, you're a joke, you're a clown if you're smart. You're a nerd, you're a goofball. But there was this program that was telling us, don't be ashamed to be smart. Because one day, you're going to be real big. You're going to be great. And those people that are laughing at you, they're still going to be chilling on the block. When I go back home now, those same people that call me that nerd, they're still chilling on the block. And not to say that it's bad, to each his own, right? Sometimes we got to acknowledge the fact that school's not for everybody, and it's okay. But sometimes you got to wake up, smell the coffee, like my English teacher used to tell me, and get on the ball. Because while you chilling there and just with the turn up, oh, because my friends, and hanging out, there's other people that are working really hard to live the dream that you just watching on Instagram. And that's the sad part of today's reality and today's youth, is that they're sold these dreams, the Cardi B's, the Jay-Z's, and the Beyoncé's, and they following them like no tomorrow. That's gonna be me, that's gonna be me. Really? Then what are you doing? Because while they're living life and doing what they can do to be great, you live in life just watching them live. When you have the same 24 hours that they have to be great, if not greater. And I always remember my grandmother telling me, lo que tú quieras hacer, no lo puedes hacer si no, tú no te vas a trabajar. You can't do anything without struggling a little bit and working hard for it. Nothing's ever given. Everything is earned. And I undervalued that. I didn't care much for her words. I'm like, Grandma, but look, they're gonna offer me this and they'll offer me these opportunities. I'm pretty smart, scholarship. She's like, what if you don't get a scholarship? Then what are you gonna do? What's next? And I didn't think about that. I'm like, oh, well, I don't know. But I started applying myself a little bit more. Because I'm like, you know what? I'm not gonna be that typical story. I'm not gonna waste time living, watching other people live. And I'm gonna actually start living and being about my academics and applying myself a little bit more. In 2012, I was the second person in my household to graduate high school. My dad was the first. And yet that still wasn't enough. And it's like, well, guys, what more do you want from me? I graduated middle school, I graduated high school. They're like, no, you gotta go further. I'm like, so what, you want me to be a doctor? You want me to be a cop? You want me to join the military? It was always about them and never what I wanted to do. No one ever sat and was like, Josué, ¿qué es lo que tú quieres? Josh, what is it that you want? It was always, well, my grandmother, or my father, or my grandpa. But at that point, because of the college prep program, there was no if, and, or buts. You're going to college. We work really hard and you're going. So I said, all right, I'm going to college. So I came here to NJCU. And it wasn't my top choice. But the 5 years that I was here was one of the best. And I made it work because I kept remembering that narrative. You know, I kept remembering the times that I would come home from school and watch my grandmother Lydia at the end of the kitchen table crying because the cops came and took my Uncle Jimmy again. I remember coming home from school and watching people that I treated like aunts and uncles cry and stress at the fact that now they got to go find the money to get their sons and daughters out of jail. Or looking for ways to get them more involved because there wasn't much involvement on my block except who's going to be the next pusher. So I kept remembering about that, and I'm like, when I go back on my block, I'm going to be that atypical narrative. I'm going to be different. And not to say that I'm better, because they're street smart and they're smart. I could say I'm probably 50%, 75% street smart. But book smart, I'm a little bit better than that. Whereas if I go back on my block, there's people that's 110 street smart. In academics, that's just not their thing. But to each his own. And I respect it, because I never forget where I come from. And no one should ever. That's why I always acknowledge and remember the fact of the campesinos that are my ancestors, of the jibaros that are my ancestors. Because they worked hard in the time that opportunity wasn't offered for them. But they made those little opportunities the best that they could. And were the greatest campesinos and jibaros that they could have been at that time. So I was like, I'm going to be the greatest student that I can be at my time. And take every opportunity that's offered. So I studied abroad. I got involved with Sword and Shield. Eventually I became a resident assistant. And that opened, I joined Greek life. I joined my fraternity, Psi Sigma Phi Multicultural Fraternity Incorporated. And I kept on persevering. I kept seeking opportunities because I'm like, when I go back home, I'm going to talk to all my friends. Look at all these opportunities. Look at all these doors that open. If you apply yourself just a little bit more. And in May 2017, I graduated NJC with my Bachelor of the Arts in History. And right away, the hunger didn't stop. I kept going. Now I'm at Montclair State for my master's in educational leadership. And just last night I was in class and I was planning out what's next. And I'm like, all right, it's 2018, 2019 I'll be done. All right, in 2028, Dr. Claudio Josué Alejo. And I literally stood in class just like that, Dr. Claudio Josué Alejo. And everybody clowned me and I'm like, nah, for real. And I tell you this because in life you gotta work hard. Nothing's ever given. You gotta work really hard for what you want. And yes, we all go through stuff. But you have the power to change that. I could have been the typical person on my block. I could have been the barber, the early father. I could have been the bodeguero. But I chose to continuously apply myself and grow and develop because I knew one day I wanted to be that person that I needed at the time. I wanted to be that inspirer. I wanted to be that motivator for the rest of my community. So I worked hard. And there's power in words, believe it or not. You have the power to change your perception. There's a difference between, yo, I'm really tired, and I'm tired, but I'm going to still keep doing what I got to do. You got to sacrifice a bit. My grandmother taught me very well at a young age, you got to sacrifice. Whether it's sacrificing going out, whether it's sacrificing some friends, and sacrificing those distractions. Everybody got a phone. So we know how distracting that could be, the Instagram, the Snapchat. It's okay to not IG and Snapchat. And I'm still learning, and it's difficult. But it's okay to turn it off for a bit, to work on yourself, work on your goals, right? To live a little rather than watch everybody else live. And ultimately, courageously do it. Courageously tell yourself, you know what? I'm going to be that doctor in 2028. And it's going to be hard, but I'm going to get there. And it doesn't matter what I go through, I'm going to get there because this is where I come from. And when I go back home, I'm going to be that doctor. And I'm going to inspire all those young scholars that are up and coming that believe that that's all that there is for them. Point A to point B of the block. I'm going to teach them that they could go beyond. And it's all right to take risks. Sometimes we hold ourselves so back. Oh, I don't think I'm ready for it. It's not for me. Well, I was told X, Y, and Z. People from where we come from don't do that. We're not smart. We don't go to school. Well, my grandmother wasn't that smart. And she went as far as getting her teacher certification eventually. And went back home when she was retired just to teach. And yeah, some of us sit here and it was difficult to get to the path we are today, but we're still pushing, we're still persevering. So never forget to work hard, to sacrifice a little bit, and to courageously do stuff. Don't hold yourself back. Because the only one holding yourself back right now is yourself. So remember, I started off as just a simple campesino in a traditional Dominican household. And now I could graciously go back home to Puerto Rico and Dominican Republic and say, I'm licenciado Claudio Josué Alejo Cortez, not just Josh. So I'm going to just end it just how the campesinos and jibaros will end their day. Voy a ser grande, grande, más grande que mis sueños. Pause. Yo soy grande. I am great. I will be greater by 2028. Thank you.